All right, folks. Now we're going to get a little bit more in-house, if you will. Josie Quintrell is going to talk to us next. Josie is the executive director of the IOOS Association. Like it seems to be kind of the trend lately, she's going to be retiring, I believe, in June, which will leave a great void for us all to work through. She's done a lot within the ocean community, the Consortium Ocean Leadership in Washington, D.C., GCOOS, and certainly within the IOOS Association. She's really led us through some challenging times and done so with the ultimate professionalism. Josie has a master's in regional planning from Cornell and a BA in biology from Colby College. And I personally am sad to see Josie leaving the community, but certainly wish her all the best in retirement. And we hope you stay affiliated with us in any way you may be able to. So without further ado, Josie, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe, and thanks for those kind remarks. It is a bittersweet decision to retire, but I'll tell you, after following Bill Burnett's presentation, I have great hope for the future of ocean observations, and it's just been wonderful to work with GCOOS for all these years. And yes, the Gulf of Maine stole the best acronym ever, GCOOS, before the Gulf of Mexico got to have it. I live on the coast of Maine, so that's why. But we had to switch it, and GCOOS became NERACOOS, and such is history. So I'm really pleased to be here today. And next slide. So as Joe said, and I think most of you know, but I think there's some new people in the meeting, so just a little bit about the association. We're a nonprofit organization. We work with GCOOS and the 10 other regional observing systems, along with the program office, really to advocate for ocean obs and Great Lakes observations writ large through the full implementation of IOOS. So we advocate, and that's both, advocate on the Hill for legislation and certainly appropriations, but then we're also just advocate small a, not lobbying, on a lot of IOOS issues. We look for common issues, emerging issues that are coming up, foster communication. As many of you know, IOOS we're housed in NOAA, the leadership is in NOAA, but we're actually 17 federal agencies. So back before COVID, we tried to do a lot more with trying to build, relationships with that. And then building with national partners. Emerging issues, we really look at the regional systems as sort of regional test beds. What are those issues stakeholders are concerned about? How do they come up through, and how do we communicate that to the IOOS program office and others? And then we do a variety of special projects, and that's been really fascinating. So each RA appoints 2 members to the board. And thank you so much, Joe. I'm sorry your tenure kind of was during COVID and we didn't get to spend enough time together. And welcome to Jorge. It's just great to have the RA representation on the board. So next slide. So during COVID, the board got together and we did a strategic plan that's really guides a lot of what we do. This is sort of our touchstone. I'm just going to highlight 2 of our goals because that's really been the focus for the last year and a half. One is to increase funding for IOOS by 100%. Now that sounds like a very greedy objective. Really, it's not greedy at all. It is, when you saw Dr. Burnett's with those holes in the Gulf of Mexico, you listen to Jorge and his staff, who are, I will say, overworked. The need for ocean obs is critical. It's never been as critical. So really, this is trying to get the funds for GCOOS and the others to fill gaps, make that information available, and deliver it out. So while it sounds like we're trying to just increase our pot, really it's to increase critical information. And you'll see down there number 4 on diversity inclusion. You'll be hearing from Ashley later on, but that's been another big focus of ours, working with the RAs and the program office. Next slide. So straight to the meat of the matter, which is appropriations. Can you advance the slide, Jen? There we go. So this is a chart of our funding for the last 2 years, and we are lucky in IOOS that we have a dedicated regional IOOS line. And as many of you know, in the last 8 years, we've done a Fill the Gap campaign. You heard about the HFR that we've worked with Steve Howden in filling some critical gaps in both radars and gliders. And so that resulted in a steady kind of increase in our budget. This year, as the RAs completed the 5-year proposals, we're sort of still building on that, but we're shifting our focus a little bit. So last summer, we were all thrilled. The president's budget was higher than it's ever been for IOOS. It looked like a really good acknowledgement of the work that GCOOS and others did. The Senate and House marks were not as high, but they were up 6 to 9 million. And then a lot of things happened. The international situation, the Ukraine war, inflation of 8.5%. So our high hopes for a budget increase didn't happen when a budget was finally passed by Congress in March. We were up $500,000, and under any other year, we might have been thinking that was great, but kind of we had our expectations high. So this year, we are fulfilling our strategic goal. We have decided to put out a bold request for IOOS, which both supports the core operational structure of the regions, as well as modernizing the infrastructure. So our request is $75.3 million. If you look, that wasn't that high from the president's budget when we were forming it. The president's budget was very late this year, and if you'll see, it matches FY21. So it doesn't match FY22. It's been a crazy budget year. And so basically, if the present budget sticks, we will have a $500,000 cut to the IOOS line. Now, IOOS is not alone. When the president's budget came out, the things that got increases were 30 by 30. There were some marine sanctuaries that were in the pipeline that were easy to move forward. A lot of emphasis on wind and mapping. Many other programs, Sea Grant, Coastal Zone, had the exact same level funding back to 21. So this is a bigger trend than just IOOS, but we're working really hard right now to make sure Congress is aware of our needs and to support us. So next slide. I was just going to say a little bit about infrastructure. You've heard that the bill passed. There was $150 million in for coastal and ocean observing systems. That is not all going to IOOS. You heard Bill talk about being able to fund some of the tower array. I'm assuming, I do not know, but NOAA has observing programs, so we are still waiting. We've been working with Carl and Oriana and his staff to kind of figure out when Congress makes that spend plan, passes that spend plan, and then we should know where we stand with that. So I guess the big issue is stay tuned. Carl might have more information on his presentation. Next slide. So this is a little bit more details about our request. And as I already said, it includes primarily the core regional association support, along with modernizing our infrastructure, as well as support for the program office. So what we're doing right now in Congress is, thank you, Jorge, and all the others, doing what we usually call March Madness, a huge number of meetings over the last 6 weeks, letting members know of the progress and of the need. So one thing we do as a result of that is members will sign what is called Dear Colleagues support letters for appropriations. The House closed last week and we had 69 members. That's a record. Usually we're around 45. So that's wonderful support. It doesn't necessarily translate into dollars, but it puts us in a really good place in the budget. I want to do a shout out that the Senate letter is now circulating, and in some ways it's if you have any contact with your senators, it would be great to reach out and just let them know how important ocean obs are, and we hope that they would support it. When you talk to the staff, to congressional staff, they say this is one of the most important things they look at, is how many members are supporting our program. And that gives them some ability when they're in really tough negotiations. And, you know, it's a lot of deserving programs out there. And so we just want to make sure those deserving programs have the information they need to make good decisions. Next slide. So I'm going to switch gears now and talk a little bit about some of our special projects. So Barb, as you all know, has been instrumental in helping us set up a HAB observing network. It's a perfect example of, I think, a big success for IOOS. The HAB researchers came to IOOS and said, look, HAB's very regionally. We are only funding short-term regional research projects. We need a sustained infrastructure, so they're building on the IOOS structure. We were able to get some money to support some pilot projects. Hopefully that's going to continue. And there is the Gulf of Mexico test bed that Barb has been very instrumental in the coast of Alabama. One thing we're doing about this is we have set up a HAB observing community of practice. Barb, once again, is on my steering committee for that. We've been holding webinars. I thought, oh, this will be great. We'll have about 40 people. Each webinar, we've had 3 so far, has had over 120 people. So there is a lot of interest in this observing network and some of the issues. So we'll be standing up, we had letters of people nominate themselves, and so we'll be selecting a new steering committee for the next year and continuing the webinars. And if you have any questions of what's happening in the Gulf of Mexico, I'm going to direct you to Barb. She is the expert by far. Next slide. So this is on climate, and as we know, climate change, the impacts vary regionally. And so what you're experiencing in the Gulf of Mexico varies from the kind of issues Alaska is forming. So we did a white paper. I'll drop it in the chat box for you. We formed a little working group to figure out what is the IOOS role in detecting the coastal climate signal. And not only detecting it, but really how do we communicate that out? Once again, we've been having a dialogue series because we realized got a lot of partners in this area. We just submitted a proposal to CLIVAR for a workshop to really take this idea to the next step, to kind of develop regional observing systems that would optimize the existing ones and to really fill gaps and move forward. We'll see how that goes. The IOC has agreed to do a coastal climate signal task force. So that's really exciting because it is an interagency issue. So we're also looking at the unfunded parts of the RA proposals to pull out the coastal climate projects. I was listening to the NOAA budget briefing yesterday. Dr. Spinrad, just continually highlights the climate issues. And so I think there's a lot of those observations in the proposals that could help not just address regional needs, but also help NOAA with their desires to become the climate services for the nation. Next slide. So I'm not going to, so Jorge asked me to talk about this, and I'm really glad he did. One of the questions we come back to time and time again is, what is the value of ocean observing? IOOS commissioned a study working with Charlie Colgan, an economist at the Center for the Blue Economy, to help us understand that. So it's been 3 years now. He worked with all the RAs to post a survey. It's a prototype study to figure out if this methodology will work. And it's one of the problems is how do you value something that has no price point? So it's a public good. You can't just go and say, oh, it's a tube of toothpaste that costs, $3. And so the economists have what they call a contingent valuation. It's a method for determining price for public goods that have no processes. So all the RAs, except for one, posted an online survey. We got around 3,000 respondents. It varied across the regions, but basically what they're concluding is that it's IOOS is evaluated at about $197 million per year. And you can see that it's much greater for organizations that use it for work, whether that's a federal agency, private company, but also quite a few, individuals use it primarily for recreational use. This hasn't been published yet. It's going out for one final review, and then we will make that report available. The next slide, I just did a couple of pie graphs to kind of just show how across, Jen, if you can go to the next slide, that would be great. Just sort of across the RAs, there's a lot of variation, but you can see that the different organizational types that are using our data, it ranges from the private sector being the largest one, and then government and academia. And if you look at how the private sector kind of breaks down, you've got everything from recreational guiding to fishing to offshore energy and consulting. Now, I want to be clear, this didn't capture any of the data that goes straight out to machine by machine. This is people accessing the data off the website. Next slide. So this is an introduction to Ashley. She's been with us since January. She's going to be talking to you later, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but it's been a great project, really helping us to shine a light on diversity issues and helping us to understand how IOOS can better address that. It's just been wonderful to have her on board with her background and her competency, and it's been a great help. So this is a joint project by the RAs and the IOOS Program Office, and so it's just been a wonderful step forward. Next slide. So yes, as Joe mentioned, I'll be retiring. Unfortunately, Joe, not at the beginning of the summer. I'm going to work through the end of the summer. So, but the director search is now underway, and if you know of a creative, dynamic person who can take the association into the next decade, please either apply yourself or encourage them. Now's the time. I think it's on a rolling basis, but the search committee is going to start reviewing the applications really soon. So if you know of anybody, please let us know. And I just want to say thank you. It's been wonderful, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Josie. Very informative. I do have a question. It may be really an obvious question, but what's the sense within Washington about the FY23 budget and beyond in light of the funding, the emergent funding that's being allocated toward the Ukraine?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think we saw that reflected in the FY22 budget that, took went from up here and came down to here. And so there's going to be a lot of pressure on the budget for international issues. I think we can't discount the impact of inflation either. So I think it's going to be a struggle. Hopefully we'll get a budget this year, and hopefully we'll get it in time. The midterm elections are happening in November, and that's always a tough time. We may, and you hear this every year, be looking at a continuing resolution if Congress can't get together to pass a budget. Right now, everybody's saying they're going to pass their budget bills. It's going to happen. So let's hope that that's the case.
I see Ruth Perry is asking the question that I was going to ask at the lead-in. I'm just thinking about lobster rolls in Harpswell. And
Ooh,
Ruth is wondering when and where is the party to celebrate all you have accomplished in the IOOS Association.
well, you're welcome up here anytime. We've got great lobster rolls. I suggest July or August. So yeah, we'll have to think about that. We're the fall meetings in Puerto Rico, that may not be a place we can accommodate everyone, but we'll always welcome up here in Maine.
All right, Ruth, thanks for that question. It's really appropriate. Any other questions?
Jorge?
Oh, Josie, thank you for that presentation and for including your mentions and charts for the economic valuation study. And I know you're trying to finish that project soon and complete that good report, but I don't want to let you leave without your telling us a little bit more about, in your experience, how can that project be expanded in the future? So if IOOS would like to develop and dive deeper into valuing in whatever ways our contributions to society and communities and sectorially. How would that look like in your opinion?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jorge, and it's one that I want to ask Charlie and Carl and Ralph Rayner and others about how do we move forward. This was a prototype study, and it was always meant to be something we would repeat and kind of continue on. One of my, and I know this was frustrating for Charlie, is we didn't get as good as responses as we had wanted, and I think it would be much more powerful if we could really figure out how we can get more responses to come back so there's more credibility in it. So I think twofold is to really look at how we might do repeat this process and what time interval that is. I think it's something also that the regions really vary. We're kind of looking at this at a national scale so we can say something collectively. I think it was really interesting to kind of see and understand who our users are. And I would personally think that would be good information for us. And then the other thing that is tricky is how do we figure out the value of our data that gets assimilated into models? And I think that's a challenge for any ocean obs. A lot of the data is so important to models, but how do we tease out that value? So I think this is a first step in really sort of understanding that. So I think it's really important, and this kind of goes back to Joe's question related to congressional, perspective. If we can show you invest this much and we're getting this much value out of it, I think that's a really strong case to tell the taxpayers why their investment is so important.
Thank you, Josie. Very good insights.
Questions?
I have a question or comment.
Sure, Stephen, yeah.
I think onto the point about the models, I think it's maybe a different type of study where, one thing is what is the improvement in assimilating the data in the models, in the forecasts, and then you can tie that to things like if you have a better 10-kilometer better or intensity, better hurricane intensity forecast, what does that say for evacuation or non-evacuation decisions? And so it may be I don't see that as a survey sort of study.
I agree, Stephen. I think it wouldn't be a survey, and maybe while I see Bill Burnett still on, maybe this is something we could all start looking at, collectively, IOOS, NDBC, and kind of do a bigger study. They talk about ocean obs so much in priorities, but we're not seeing a lot of that translate into, I think, what we vision is necessary to address societal needs. But you're right, Stephen. I think it is a different study.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. Pat.
Yeah, one more. Josie, I was just wondering when you're up on the hill and you're talking to staffers and things like that, do you get do they buy into the large scale thematic note themes of the blue economy and those types of things, and do you try to tailor your message to take advantage of that?
That's a good question. Yes, we definitely tailor our message to whom we're speaking to. So we often do some research. We figure out what the member's interest is. I mean, we only have a very short time, and economy is critically important. I don't know if the term blue economy always makes sense to people, but we always bring it back to, the coastal community and what the information is providing. So the economy is critical, jobs is critical, information to support existing industries is critical. Whether or not they get the terms that, is being, the term of art, I don't know. I do think they understand things like the Internet of Things and being smarter, a smarter ocean, smarter things. So yeah, so it's all rolled up, but it really kind of depends on who our audience is, what we're talking about.
Other questions? Okay, I see none. So unless someone else has a better insight or sees another question, I'll let Josie terminate at this point. And Josie, please,
I don't want to terminate.
Steve DeMarco has his hand up,
Can I
Joe.
just put myself on mute?
okay, who's got a hand up?
Steve DeMarco had his hand up. I'm not sure if he still has a question for you.
Are you there, Steve? Okay, well, again, if there are any other questions, feel free to forward them to myself or Jen, and we'd be happy to forward them on to Josie. Josie, again, thanks for all you've done. I mean, we've said it a number of times. It can't be said enough. It's a real tough job. I mean, it's worse than being between a rock and a hard place, in my opinion. It's very, very, very difficult, and you've done great things during your tenure up there. And I wish you all the best on behalf of GCOOS, and we certainly wish you well as you move on. And by all means, please stay with us for the rest of the afternoon if you can.